Your questions for the Monday Mailbag and our preview of the New Orleans Saints wide receiver position all on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Rock Auto. Go and check them out. They have an amazing selection. They've got reliably low prices and all the parts your car will ever need. Go and check them out at rockauto.com and let them know that Locked On sent you. On today's episode, we're going to be getting to our questions for our Monday mailbag from the Locked On Saints Facebook group. Got some folks asking about Melvin Ingram, who's still a free agent. Could the Saints be interested? I'll tell you why, maybe not, but we'll also take a look at some breakout potential players going into 2021 and my prediction for the week one quarterback as of now heading into Green Bay or heading into the matchup against Green Bay, plus more questions there. But before we get to that, we're going to continue on with our position by position preview heading into New Orleans Saints training camp to make sure you know every name on the roster. This time, the wide receiver position, who's gone, who's back, who is new, and who I think could potentially make that 53-man roster cut down. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, co-managing editor over at CanalStreetChronicles.com, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints. All right, family, so we're opening up today's episode in a brand new week here at Locked On Saints by looking at the Saints wide receiver position. We're going to talk about the position as a whole, who are the names, who's there, and then in the next segment, we'll get to the predictions looking ahead to 2021, who makes the roster, who's in for a big year, who's a good breakout candidate. We'll answer all of those questions. So for this segment, we're going to start with three different things here. We'll talk about who the Saints lost, who's new, and who's returning. Just get you up to date, up to speed with all of the names on the roster and get some stats in there too, because there's a lot of, let's say, vacant targets going into 2021. It might look like, but we kind of already know where some of those are going in the first place. So anyway, we'll get to this as we continue through. So let's talk about who the Saints lost during the 2021 offseason. Of course, the Saints a little bit cash strapped. A little bit cash strapped is a really nice way to say $100 million over the salary cap. So they did have to make some cuts toward the middle of their roster in order to be able to figure all of this out. One of the bigger losses, though, and over the course of this offseason, was wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who had 61 catches on 82 targets, 726 yards, and 5 tutties in 2020, and really was your lead go-to receiver in 2020 because of the injury to Michael Thomas. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that your lead go-to receiver was, of course, Alvin Kamara, who again had over 80 catches for the fourth straight season in his career. But in terms of the wide receiver position, Emmanuel Sanders is really your most present, most available receiver that you were able to utilize all throughout, even though he himself missed a couple of games due to COVID protocols as well. The Saints also lost Benny Fowler, who was a little bit of an off-season standout early on as we got through sort of that truncated, unique training camp structure that the Saints had before 2020. But when he got into the actual swing of things with the team, only 2 catches on 6 targets for 11 touchdowns, 11 touchdowns. That would have been very impressive. 11 yards, but unfortunately had some injuries, dealt with some time, was a great special teamer for the Saints, made some great plays early on in the season for him in that spot, but unfortunately just wasn't able to stay healthy and therefore also didn't stick with the team. You also had Austin Carr on the team last year, who was lost over the offseason, 3 catches on 4 targets, 27 yards and a touchdown. Jake Kumaro was brought in a little bit late toward the end of the season, but didn't really see any time. And then, of course, Tommy Lewis had 1 catch for 5 yards, no touchdowns. So those are the players that you lost. The biggest name there and the biggest impact player there being Emmanuel Sanders with over 60 catches and over 700 yards receiving. Everybody after that was 3 catches or less. So not a huge blow to the Saints wide receiver position in terms of the volume that they lost. 95 targets, 67 catches, 769 yards, and 6 touchdowns. you already get the idea where some of that is going to go. But we'll come back around to that in just a moment. Let's talk about who's new in the building for the New Orleans Saints. Jake Lampman is returning. He started his career with the Saints, spent some time with the Bucs, and he was with the Tampa Bay Vipers in the XFL. Ends up now returning to the New Orleans Saints. 6 foot, 205 pounds, 4.47 speed. We'll see what he's able to show during camp now that he's had some time to not only maybe settle into the NFL a little bit after coming in as an undrafted free agent years ago, but also has the XFL experience to bring in with him as well. Another guy that's looking to sort of, I don't want to say revitalize his career because both these guys are early on in their career, but coming to the New Orleans Saints now after joining as an undrafted free agent with the Falcons last year is former Tulane and Oklahoma State wide receiver Jalen McClaresky, who stands at about 5'11". He's listed at 165 pounds, so certainly you'd like to see him put on a little bit of weight there, but he was very productive in his collegiate years. 204 receptions, 2,446 yards, 21 total touchdowns. That was both his combined stats with Tulane and with Oklahoma State. 4.28 40 at his pro day coming out. He ended up signing with the New Orleans Saints after doing a local day during some pro day workouts with Tulane this offseason. The Saints, of course, also drafted and brought in a new face, the first wide receiver that they've drafted since they took Tre'Quan Smith in the 3rd round of the 2018 draft with South Alabama wide receiver Kawaan Baker. 6'1", 210 pounds. He's exactly what the Saints like in terms of build. Brings a little bit of athleticism as well, 4.4 speed, and does a little bit of everything. 126 catches, just over 1,800 receiving yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns at South Alabama. Also had 11 rushing touchdowns as well. So I'm sure the Saints like that versatility and what they could potentially do with him there. And in the Saints, the only free agent wide receiver that they added that has, doesn't even have really any NFL experience. He spent some time on a practice squad, but hasn't seen any preseason action, hasn't seen any actual live snaps, would be Easop Winston, who they brought in over the offseason. He was a free agent signing after spending some time with the now Los Angeles Rams. He was super productive at Washington State in college, 132 receiving yards, 132 receptions, just over 1,600 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns during his career there. So we'll see if he's able to bring some of that back with him as he gets another chance with another team with the New Orleans Saints. Now, in terms of who's returning, you know the names. Michael Thomas, Tre'Quan Smith, Marquez Callaway, Deonte Harris, Lil'Jordan Humprey. And then you can probably fold Ty Montgomery and Juwan Johnson in there, even though you know that they're both hybrid at other positions. We talked a bit about Ty Montgomery when we were talking about the running backs last week. He only had 3 catches in 2020, so we don't really have to go too in detail with him. Juwan Johnson, we know, is mostly going to be focused in on tight end, so we'll talk about him when we get to that position. But you have a Michael Thomas that's returning from injury. He had only 40 catches, just over 400 yards, no touchdowns for the first time in his career while dealing with the injury and all the other things that were going on with him. Just an injury-stricken season for the most part for Michael Thomas. Tre'Quan Smith, 34 catches, 448 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was your second receiver when it came to touchdown production. Everybody else underneath that was around 200 yards or less, 213 from Marquez Callaway, 186 from Deonte Harris, and then just 46 and 27 when it came to Lil'Jordan Humprey and Ty Montgomery, respectively. So when it comes down to these players that are returning, you already know sort of where the targets that get freed up by the guys that left are going, right? They're going to Michael Thomas, and they're going to whoever it is that rises up to become the second wide receiver on the team. We'll talk about that. Who could be that second receiver? Who are those that have the best chance at making the roster once we get to the 53-man cut down after the 3rd and final preseason game as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, and before we get to that, there's some big action going on in the NBA tonight, especially for those of you that are New Orleans sports fans. Monty Williams, Chris Paul, formerly parts of the New Orleans Pelicans / Hornets organization. They're right now favored -5.5 over the Los Angeles Clippers to make it to the NBA Finals with a win in their game tonight. If you want to get in on that action and all of the other action that the BetOnline.ag folks have to offer, just head over to BetOnline.ag. You can take a look at what they've got in NBA, NCAA. We've got the NHL Stanley Cup Finals about to get started. They've got fights. They've got reality TV. Everything that you can imagine you can get involved in over at betonline.ag. So go and check them out. And don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code LOCKEDON to get that 50% welcome bonus over at betonline.ag. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We've talked a bit about each of these wide receivers and what they either have done or what they're taking away from the New Orleans Saints or what they're bringing to the New Orleans Saints, whatever it is, depending upon whether or not they're leaving, returning, or if they're brand new to the team. Now, let's take a look at who has the best option to be the best chance to be the number 2 wide receiver, I think. We'll talk about who has the ability to make the roster, I think, and who is the big-time breakout candidate as well. So the lock on the roster, no matter what you do, no matter who you're talking to, no matter what, is Michael Thomas. I know we haven't seen much of Michael Thomas over the course of the offseason, but he's also rehabbing from his ankle injury, trying to make sure that he comes back from that. He pushed and pushed and pushed all throughout the 2020 season to try to be there to help Drew Brees to another ring before what would be his final year, and I think what everyone assumed would be his final year. But unfortunately, things came up short. They weren't able to do that. But Michael Thomas now has spent the entire offseason rehabbing that ankle. You haven't seen him working out with either of these quarterbacks. We haven't seen it, at least, but for the most part, what you've seen is him focused on his recovery. So he's a lock for your 2021 team. And I think that you see his sort of brand expand a bit, regardless of which one of these quarterbacks is the next quarterback behind Drew Brees, because I do think that a lot of times when you talk to people that aren't bigger fans of Michael Thomas, they credit a lot of it to Drew Brees. So this is an opportunity for him to perform with another quarterback, just like he did with Taysom last year, just like he did with Teddy Bridgewater 2 years ago, but now leaving no questions left to be asked. So I look forward to seeing what Michael Thomas does. We'll talk a little bit more about him here in just a moment as well in our mailbag as we get into the third segment here in just a moment. Tre'Quan Smith for me is also a lock. It's his contract year. He's a wide receiver here looking to have an opportunity to step into an outside receiver role, which he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity to be able to perform in with preseason preparation. Remember, he performed on the outside quite a bit last year, but it mostly had to do with Michael Thomas being unavailable, Emmanuel Sanders being unavailable for some games. And so it wasn't really like preparation. It was more so, hey, we need you to do this now. And that's kind of what happened to Tre'Quan Smith when he came into the NFL. It was, hey, the Saints need you to play in the slot, and he had to learn the slot position. He's gotten a little bit more comfortable there, but now he has an opportunity to replicate a little bit more of what he did over at UCF, where he averaged 19.8 yards per catch in his final season, where he went over 1,000 yards and just had this massive breakout season. You look for him to potentially be able to do that here in a contract year in 2021. I think Deonte Harris is a lock for your roster, not only as a wide receiver, but as a return specialist as well. So I think for him, you look at 20 catches, 186 yards, and a touchdown. You look at what he brought in the playoffs as well. Remember, that's just regular season stats, but you look at what he brought in the playoffs as well, where he almost looked like a go-to receiver at one point during the playoffs. I think that his role continues to grow, just like we saw it grow from year 1 to year 2. We should see the same thing from year 2 to year 3. We just need to see how the Saints are going to balance his involvement in the offense along with his return specialist abilities, because you definitely don't want to lose him as a returner, as productive as he is. All right, number 4 on the list should surprise nobody if you followed me for any amount of time during the 2020 season. It's Marquez Callaway, the undrafted wide receiver going into his second year now, coming in from the Tennessee Volunteers. 21.2 yards per catch in his final year at Tennessee. He is somebody that can stretch the field, even though he doesn't have 4.3, 4.2 speed. And I think oftentimes we too often actually equate speed and field stretching as if they can't be one without the other. Like you have to be one in order to be the other. And that's just simply not the case. If you're an experienced and a crafty route runner, you can create natural separation downfield. If you're able to gather leverage, force your DB off of his own leverage and sort of out of frame, and then you're able to get ahead of him and stack and then create a situation for that corner to where they're in trail technique. The quarterback has the natural separation that you then control with your ability to downshift and accelerate in order to be able to create that separation to threaten down the field. And Marquez Callaway does that really, really well. If you watch the film study that we did over at Who Dat Confessional on Saturday, there was a touchdown to Ben Watson in 2011. That was a lot of what I just kind of described, right? Your ability to be able to get around a corner, but then also get back on top of that corner downfield. so that you can create that separation. That's something Marquez Callaway does very well, and a quarterback that's able to stretch the field a little bit more than Drew Brees had the ability to do later on in his career, and that the offense really didn't push him to do at any point later on in his career, then all of a sudden gets the opportunity to be able to take advantage of that. And so I think Marquez Callaway not only makes the roster, but I'll even put it out there that I think he scores his first touchdown in the first 2 weeks of the 2021 season. Maybe a bit of a bold prediction, but doesn't feel too bold for me. And then I think Kawaan Baker makes the roster. I think there's something to be said in the fact that he was drafted, and he was the first wide receiver that was drafted by the Saints since Tre'Quan Smith in 2018. There's also something to be said that he had an undrafted free agent agreement already ready, but the Saints ended up selecting him at the end and in that 7th round anyway, which could be that maybe there was another target that got drafted ahead. Maybe they knew that somebody else was interested in him, but even that latter case is that they wanted to make sure that they got him on the team. I think there's a reason for that. 6'1", 210 pounds, 4.4 speed, very versatile, can be utilized all over the place. A little bit of a running back with the ball in his hands. I'm a big fan of what Kawaan Baker's potential is. Now we just have to see it all pan out and it all sort of develop in time to be able to have an impact in the season. But I think that he gets a run here and gets an opportunity early on in the year. And then finally, just to include this caveat too, that's if the Saints keep 5 wide receivers. If the Saints keep 6, it's going to come down to special teams for that 6th spot. So I would give that to either Lil'Jordan Humprey, who has proven to be a fantastic special teamer, as well as a run blocker, or potentially even Jalen McClaresky if he ends up being a good gunner and return specialist. Then you have that additional return specialist behind Deonte Harris, and you have that gunner that can help replace a big-time loss over the offseason in Justin Hardy. Certainly, there are a couple of other receivers that could potentially push for the spot, but for me right now, that's the 5, and then that's the 6th spot, what it comes down to for me. We'll see how it all actually plays out over the course of training camp, but if nothing else, you now know the wide receiver names heading into camp, and we'll see how the race adjusts and changes as we continue through those weeks. And of course, 3 games of preseason action can help out as well. We saw that help out Lil'Jordan Humprey at one point early on in his career. All right, coming up next, we're going to jump to some Monday mailbag questions. We're going to revisit Michael Thomas. Is he going to be able to be productive with a new quarterback? And we'll take a look at many more great questions coming from the Locked On Saints Facebook group as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I don't know about y'all, man, but adding the daily commute back into my schedule with having to travel for work now and sort of getting back to that rhythm of things has really sort of depleted my resources. If anybody was a StarCraft fan, depleted my resources quite a bit by the time that I hit like 2-3 p.m. But one of the things that's helped me be able to stay up and do the job that I'm trying to do as well as I can is Built Bars. Built Bars have been fantastic. They've got 9 different flavors. These are protein bars that taste like candy bars, covered in 100% chocolate, soft, easy to chew, and taste amazing. You don't have to regret eating these Built Bars. You know, you have some protein bars out there that you go and grab from like the corner store or whatever, and they just taste like regret while you're eating them. And you're like, oh, well, at least I'm getting my protein. You don't have to worry about any of that when it comes to Built Bars. You can actually enjoy yourself while having these. Listen to some of these flavors: coconut almond, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, raspberry. If you're a fruit and chocolate fan as well, they've got something for everybody, and limited edition flavors that continue to rotate over at the website as well. So head over there today at BuiltBar.com. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 to get 15% off. That's 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com. And of course, that daily commute means more car servicing, more car maintenance as well. So if there's anything that you need for your vehicle, part, piece, accessory, whatever it is that you might be looking for, head over to rockauto.com, one place that I trust whenever I need something for my vehicle. And especially with the heat being what it is outside, if you need a battery, if you need something to help you cool off, you need one of those like little window tints to put up in your, don't worry about going over and paying way more than you need to at any of those, those chain stores around the corner. Just head over to rockauto.com from the comfort of your own home and have it delivered directly to your door and pay much less, because you're going to be paying the same price as the professionals. It's not, escalated prices for those of us that are do-it-yourselfers. So go and check them out at rockauto.com. Family business that's been helping auto parts customers for over 20 years online. And don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrap it up today's episode with your questions from the Locked On Saints Facebook group for our Monday mailbag. Let's get it started with a big topic here. Fernando Albino asking, Melvin Ingram, any chance that the Saints could get him on a good deal? Look, I think Melvin Ingram, even though he's available late in this free agency cycle, is going to be somebody that is going to get a lot of attention. I've heard the Rams might be interested in him. He, of course, tweeted out saying that, hey, me and Julio should be a package deal for the Titans. The Titans certainly need that help at the edge rusher position. I think the Saints are actually going to be okay when it comes to the defensive end position and the edge rusher position. They seem to be very comfortable there. And if they're going to spend some money, I think they spend it elsewhere on the defense. Cornerback, linebacker, something like that before they go and spend some money on Melvin Ingram. But I am very interested and intrigued to see where he does end up. Now, if he ended up with New Orleans, I certainly wouldn't be disappointed by that at all. Let's get to Jesse Cole Williamson, who asked, who will be the starting quarterback for the Saints versus the Packers, and is there any way to bet on it? So BetOnline.ag doesn't have a prop right now for starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints week 1, but I imagine that as training camp and preseason continues to roll along, that prop will jump up. So keep an eye out for it. And of course, I'll let you know when it's up as well over at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. As of right now, I still look at Jameis Winston as being the guy week 1. But again, this is in June, right? This is June 28th as I'm recording this. The season doesn't start until mid-September. So there's a lot of time here. There's still camp in the preseason games, all of that to figure all this out. But as of right now, just based on NFL experience, which we know that the Saints put a lot of weight into and a lot of trust into, I'm going to go with Jameis Winston as the starting quarterback week 1. Now, it doesn't mean that he'll be the starting quarterback week 3, week 5, week 7, but we'll see how it all works out. Let's get now to Kelly Ludoveris, who's got a couple of questions here. Last year's breakout player was Trey Hendrickson, in Kelly's opinion, and I would agree with that, right? 13.5 sacks, great season. Have you got an early tip this year for a breakout? Yeah, I mean, I think Tre'Quan Smith is right in line for it, right? Contract year, opportunity, the intent of the offense changing. I think all of that, or the shift of intent in the offense that may look to travel a little bit deeper down the field, I think all of that lines up well for Tre'Quan Smith, and I would look at him as a potential breakout candidate on offense for sure. And in question number 2, as it stands right now, where do you think that Aaron Rodgers will be playing this season? Well, this kind of goes back to Jesse's question as well about who will be the starting quarterbacks in that game. I think it's Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Aaron Rodgers goes anywhere. I think he'll be a Packer in 2021. If he does get traded, though, then hello, Denver would be my expectation. Let's get to Joseph McKenzie. Do you think that Michael Thomas will put up similar numbers under a new quarterback? So this is a really interesting one. I've talked about this before. I think that Michael Thomas's catch number might go down, but his yardage might go up. Like, I don't look at Michael Thomas as being somebody that's going to come out of this season and have another 149 catch season, right? Like, I just don't see that being the case. If you look at his stats from 2016, where you saw a little bit more of maybe the downfield offense still there for New Orleans, he only had 92 receptions, but he had 1,100 yards, which was his least up until the 2020 season. But, you know, he was also splitting time with another wide receiver. They were trying to figure out who is the real number 1. And of course, he had 9 touchdowns during that season as well, with a long of 62. Now, he also had, with a long of 46. Now, he also had 12.4 yards per catch that season, which has steadily gone down each year. 12.4, 12 even, 11.2, 11.6 went back up in 2019. And then in 2020, it was down to just 11 flat. And then you can also look at yards per target. He was at his second highest in 2016 with 9.4, with 9.6 being his highest in his first All-Pro season in 2018. So when the volume of catches is up, that will, of course, really stand out for him. 125, 149 catches, 3 straight years at over 100 receptions when no New Orleans Saint had even done that before. But I think that catch number might come down to maybe more of the in between the 2017-2018 season. 2017, he had 104. 2018, he had 125. I think he's somewhere in between there. Maybe doesn't lead the league, but I would see it more with that 12.4, 12.6, maybe even more yards per catch average to maybe bolster him a little bit more in the yardage game. And I would expect to see him in double-digit touchdowns for the first time in his career in 2021. All right, and our final question here comes from Michael Koger, who asked, which 2018 draft pick has the best season, Marcus Davenport or Tre'Quan Smith? Do you see either one of them taking the next step and having a breakout? Both of them have the opportunity. I think Tre'Quan Smith has the better year based on the intent, right? So the opportunity is going to be there because Marcus Davenport should be the starter opposite Cam Jordan. Your only other options there are Tano Passanio, who is just now joining the team, and then of course Peyton Turner, who's a rookie. We'll see how he pans out, of course, during over the course of camp. I'm actually really excited about him the more that I see him. But anyway, Tre'Quan Smith won't have a rotation that he'll have to deal with as much as Marcus Davenport would over on the defensive lines, where you see a ton of rotating all the time, moving inside, moving outside. If Tre'Quan Smith wins that wide receiver 2 spot, that Z receiver spot, then that's where he's going to spend the majority of his time, and therefore he'll have greater opportunities, especially if Jameis Winston ends up being the quarterback who targeted before the 2019 season outside receivers 47.1% of the time, second most from 2009 to 2019. I think that means that Tre'Quan Smith has the better opportunity and better intent that are both in line for his potential, while Marcus Davenport has the potential and the opportunity, but the intent of the defense will be to continue to rotate and keep players fresh. All right, y'all, much more on the way this week. We'll be joined again by Andrew Doak, continuing on with the conversation he and I had as we talk a little bit more about Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, and other camp battles. And then we'll, of course, continue to go position by position. Wednesday fundamentals this week's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking zone blocking versus gap or man blocking schemes over on the offensive line. So we've got a lot coming up here. Just a little bit less than a month now away from New Orleans Saints training camp beginning. So make sure you're here every single Monday through Friday, whether it's on your favorite podcast provider or on YouTube. Now that you're done with today's episode, go and find out what else is happening around the world of sports today with the Locked On Today podcast. I appreciate you as always for being here, for supporting, watching, listening, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Everything that you've been doing means the world. So I appreciate you very much. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust to that nation. I'll holla at you.